Welcome to Strictly Creative, the podcast that speaks with artists, creators, dreamers, and those who support creativity in all its forms. Today's episode revisits a conversation nearly a decade in the making. In 2015, Steve Zytveld was in his third year of the Master of Divinity program at St. Paul University. That first interview was featured on Conversations with Garmamie on YouTube under the title Studying to Pursue a Vocation to Ministry. Much has happened since then. Steve is now an ordained deacon in the Anglican Church of Canada. He currently works as a community chaplain in a low-income housing neighborhood in Ottawa's West End, and his ministry has also extended into parish work and hospital pastoral services. Along the way, his experiences have deepened his understanding of listening, presence, and the value of every person's story. In this follow-up interview, recorded earlier this summer and released in the fall of 2025, Steve reflects on his work, his journey, and what it truly means to be there for others.
Whenever you want to start, I've hit record. Wonderful. Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good to be here. It's good to see you. And you were just saying the last time we spoke was 9.5 years ago.
Yep. That would have been the fall of 2015. And it's now the spring of 2025.
Wow.
That's 10 years. That's a lot of, as I like to say, that's a lot of water under the bridge. A lot has changed. We're living in a different world than we did then. So it's, first of all, it's great to see you again. I'm glad that we've been able to reconnect.
I've been seeing you across town like many times. Sometimes I'm like, I'm on a bus or whatever, and I look across and I see you. I'm like, hey, that's Steve. And I'm like, hey, I need to do a follow-up interview with him. And because I think the last time I interviewed you, I said I would do a follow-up a year after. And here we are almost a decade out, and I'm finally doing the follow-up. All I'm saying is I've been seeing you across town. So sometimes, we bumped into each other.
A couple of times, but not as much as would have been better. But, here we are. We're no longer, several yards away from each other. And as I'll be honest, I'm usually lost in my own little world. And I'm watching the traffic, obviously, but I've got a quick story. I've got a story to,
Please.
And I once again owe a public apology to John Ekpata.
Oh, wow. How's he doing, John?
Well, I haven't talked to him in a couple of years. But last fall, I think it was October, I had just gotten off of work, and I was on my way to a doctor's appointment. So I got onto the Route 12 bus, no, the 11, and at Wellington and Holland in Hintonburg, and so I literally ran into him, but because I was lost in my own little world, like I tripped on his feet, but because I was tired and worried about my doctor's appointment, I didn't know it was him. So I went and I took a seat in the back. It was only when he was disembarking, I think it was at Preston, did I realize it was him. So I had this moment of, oh my gosh, I feel like an idiot. And so anyways, but I mean, I had literally run into him. And so anyways, so I owe him a real apology, and I'm hoping that our paths cross again soon because, we live relatively near to each other. And I mean, he's one of my, he's one of my top 20 favorite poets in Ottawa. So anyways, I get to put that out there. So if you wave at me and I don't wave back, yell or throw something at me so that I'm not just walking around in a daze.
if John is listening, I'm pretty sure he just heard that apology. But you're in your own world. You're saying you're in your own world, and I think most of us can relate. Sometimes we're in our own thoughts, and if you're out in public, you may not be seeing what's necessarily in front of you, besides the traffic, this, that, and the other. But I also went back to our interview that we did in that 9.5 years ago, and recently when I bumped into you and I spoke with you, you mentioned that a lot's been happening. You've been doing a lot of work, obviously in the community. You've been you're doing some interesting stuff, and the reason why I want to do this follow-up is because I said I was going to, and I'm curious to know, in the last decade, in terms of your spiritual journey, what's that experience been like? Obviously this is for the Strictly Creative podcast series, which is about creativity and art, but spirituality, faith, all that, I think, plays into it as well. And you're someone with a huge, rich creative history here in this city. So what's the last decade been like for you?
Well, I'll begin by saying that no, I am not on a recruiting drive. I'm not the sort of person who when I talk to someone, I'm not the sort of person who says, I want you in my church. In fact, I tell people that I do not want to see them in my church. Because it's not about me. I may have mentioned this in our last talk. I've already said that. Do not want to see you in my church, because if someone feels so called, if they feel themselves that they should be there, I will welcome them. I will show them kindness, hospitality, but it's not about what I want. It's about what they feel they need or what they want. And that's one of the big problems with religion today. And I'm not slagging anybody in particular. It's that people should feel drawn to organized faith, and they often aren't. And if somebody has a spiritual experience and they wish to speak to somebody who can be present for them, that's entirely up to them. I'm not on a recruiting drive. If you're listening to this and you have spiritual questions, you can reach out to me. But there's no obligation when I talk to somebody. There's no point in saying, well, I'll see you on Sunday. It's always a question of what, because that's how it was for me. My conversion moment, my talking to a mentor, and look where I am now. It's been a great journey so far. The other thing I find is that along those lines, organized religion lacks, or is in need of more creativity and imagination. Because we have all this beautiful music and art from the past, and we should be building on that instead of merely being nostalgic. And imagination doesn't just mean insight into creating for ourselves something beautiful. It also means empathy. It means hearing the other person, being able to see their life as much as you can from their perspective, instead of imposing what you think or feel onto theirs. So that's 2 points.
Personal question.
Yes.
How has, and I'll give you context as to why I'm asking this this question. Over time, we regardless of what it is that we do, our behavior, broadly speaking, our perspective, we evolve, in terms of like, if you're a writer, maybe your writing changes. Maybe you're more interested in writing poetry than writing short stories, just as an example. When it comes to your relationship to your faith, because you initially described it as a journey, right?
Yes.
In the last decade, if we can jump on that, how has your journey or your relationship with your faith, has it evolved? If so, how has it evolved? Through the experiences you've had, because I know you're involved in the community. You play various roles.
Well, to begin with, I have brought with me to my spiritual life, my faith life, I have brought my own gifts to the table to share. So that means after several years of being a fiction writer and a poet, that helps me greatly when I'm preaching sermons. It helps me, again, it helps me when I'm speaking to somebody who is in a crisis, whether it's mental health, emotional health, spirituality. It gives me that ability to talk to them and hear them and not just come up with some platitude or faulty advice. So I'm not going to come up with some dumb phrase when they're in a crisis and saying something like, well, everything happens for a reason, which is a terrible thing to tell somebody because let's just face it, shit happens. You don't pray your problems away. You can say, well, the number one prayer that people should remember is thank you. But the other thing is that, people find strength in our common faith. They find strength in each other to get through the difficult moments. One of the things that I've learned through hospital ministry is that the real miracle is how we are brought together. And again, like I said, you can't pray cancer away, but you can find that support in one another when you are drawn together in a community, and it can be a secular community. But that is where, and I'm not just talking about my idea of God. It's the shared experience. It is the spirit of people brought together. Because despite what our culture, our society likes to think, nobody is an island. We're in this together. And when we, as I tend to do myself, when we say, well, I've got this all under control, we often don't. And we don't take up that gift of being there for each other.
Does faith and religion and spirituality, I know that those are many different things to whoever's listening to this, when I say the word faith, when I say religion, spirituality, do you think it's still, or not so much does it have a role in today's society where, we're on our phones, we're on the internet, we're playing with AI, technology's, so technology is the new God almost, or the new faith. What is the role of faith in a world that's AI driven, technology obsessed, and so on? Does faith have a role? I know it's a big sort of question.
That is a really big and interesting question, and the one of the biggest problems is how high technology is, how it divides us more than anything else. I mean, we're connected to each other better, but at the same time, it gives us more fields in which we can argue and alienate one another. And I think part of that is because we've lost sight of how technology is a tool. It is not a thing unto itself. I mean, this came up in a course I took, and artificial intelligence can write something. It can make an image. It can write a poem. But what's missing from that is a real sense of the human experience. It can imitate us. It can mimic us. But it isn't human. And I feel, or I hope, I have faith that, eventually all these things like AI will sort of go the way of the CB radio. It's the sort of thing that people will realize doesn't hold the promise of real interpersonal connection. And I have faith that we're going to start finding each other and ourselves once again.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was you listen more. You not that way, but you spoke on the importance of listening when people
being present.
Being present. Yes.
Yes. Well, the thing is that we all need to be cared for. As I said, we cannot see ourselves as being a rock or an island. We need each other. And that's part of what I feel shared religious or spiritual experience or cultural experiences. I mean, we don't have to always bring God into this or the divine. I prefer using the word the divine because that sort of expands even larger the idea of the transcendent. But we need to be cared for. We need to, we need someone to look after us so we can look after somebody else. And that's all there is to it. That's the nature of community. And we too often leave that until a situation gets bad, like really bad. Loneliness and isolation are big problems in our culture. And I've read the report over the last few years, series of reports, that being socially isolated is as unhealthy for you as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day or eating a lot of fatty food. It so badly harms the soul and the mind and ultimately the body, because those are all linked together. We cannot be physically healthy unless we are mentally healthy and we have some sort of inner peace.
And it goes back to being part of a community and having access to community. But before I ask you the question of the theme of isolation, because you're absolutely right, I want to go back. Can you differentiate when you say God and the divine? What's the distinction there, if you can elaborate on that?
The divine is a more open concept. It embraces different spiritual approaches and individual approaches to spirituality or to faith. Because for me to say everything holy revolves around just my notion of God is more self-centered than anything else. There are from a Christian perspective, human beings are made in the image of God, the Creator. But we are each so different. Like our experiences, our lives, our perspectives, our experiences. But so when we speak, again, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, of the infinitude of God, that is reflected in each of us, each human being, and regardless of all the differences. And so that is why everybody sees the divine differently from somebody else, from everybody else.
Thank you for that. On the topic of isolation and the pandemic, from your perspective and from what you've experienced in the community and seeing people interacting with people and so on, how do you interpret that time and how it isolated people and divided people and how did faith help you personally during that time, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, first of all, I'm still recovering from the pandemic in the sense, as a lot of us are, most of us. I'm still recovering from it, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally and socially. As my wife Kathy likes to say, we're still learning how to people again, and that's basically it, because many of us spent almost like 2 years locked down. I began my current work a year and a half into the pandemic, and it was another year before we took down our restrictions. Masking and keeping 6 feet away from each other. On one hand, that was really good common sense. But to tell people to stay away from each other or to not get too close, that has only added to our long-standing anxieties, especially, again, in a society that emphasizes individuality. So we are still rebuilding our connections. We are still rebuilding our communities. There has been no organization that I have encountered over the last couple of years, no organization who has regained their volunteer force. And part of that is because some people are aging out, which is natural. But there was also that barrier to other people getting involved and coming together. So, and again, the technology helped keep us connected, but kept us apart.
how did you lean on your faith during that time on a personal level? Because if I may, there was so much fear, right? There was fear everywhere. There was fear. There was, um, fear, anxiety. There was, everything on the news was never positive. Doom scrolling, etc. How did you lean on? Did you lean on your faith during that time?
It certainly strengthened me, but the experience also strengthened my faith. It strengthened my awareness that we do better together. Good, better things are possible when we do put more faith in each other. And when it comes down to my own personal faith in higher powers, in the transcendent, in the divine, it made me realize that, like I said, bad things happen. And, I don't for a moment believe that in my own cosmology, I don't believe that God said, life isn't interesting enough on earth. Let's make things more fun for everybody. And so as a result, my faith has opened my eyes to the suffering and the needs of other people. It's made me realize the degree that even the people who we think of as the wrongdoers, the villains in our lives, and given the current political climate, I don't have to explain that one any further, but even those people are wrestling with their own problems, and they're often motivated by crappy things that have happened to them. So, again, you don't need religion to tell you this, but we are better off when we work together to a common cause, and don't try to screw each other over, or don't try to get more than we deserve, or earn, or have.
How has community and your interactions while serving the community and people in that community either challenged or enhanced your experience of the divine?
Oh, that's a really good question. It has reminded me about how sacred every person is. It's reminded me that we often take our own humanity for granted, but we also take the humanity of others for granted. And I see in my experiences, I have seen such holiness in people who I may serve, but even more so in others helping each other. If that makes sense, because one of the phrases that we all hear a lot is how some event or some person or some statement has diminished their faith in humanity. But once we get past really how shitty some people can be, how crappy some circumstance can be, when we get past that, we all hurt. We all have regrets. We've all been hurt, some of us more than others. And when we actually do the right thing, when we do help each other, when we do see the good in a situation, it is so damn beautiful. It's amazing. More people should be doing that. But often it's the first step. It's asking the first question that is so daunting for most of us. So that is where I've learned it never really hurts to make the first step. It's scary as hell. I mean, you're not always going to get the positive result that we hope and pray for. But at least, again, this is where empathy, imagination come into play. And something I have to be clear about is that we cannot know or fully understand another person's predicament. I mean, some people are so poor, all they have is money. But on the other hand, I think what I'm trying to say is that we all have more in common than we think we do. We all have similar feelings. We all have similar needs, similar injuries. And if we just reach out a little bit, if we just get over ourselves, if we, and I'm speaking more for myself here, if we leave our privilege at the door and expectations, and like I said, I'm speaking more from my own perspective, then literally we can help each other and save each other.
You're dealing with folks who may be going through various types of crises. And how does one find balance with that sort of work? Because eventually I would imagine it could be overwhelming for anyone. Correct me if I'm wrong. And how do you deal with all that? Because is it overwhelming? I guess this is what I'm asking.
It certainly can be. And I mean, I will say to start that faith gets me through. And when I say faith gets me through, it doesn't mean me standing in a field and holding up my arms to the sky and saying, "Hey man, thanks," or "Please give me strength." That faith is, again, not just in the transcendent or the divine, but in how we ourselves are sacred, how we are we're each precious. And, that's not a religious or spiritual thing. That's also something that you can see in the eyes of other people, the eyes of the suffering. And honestly, it's also the feeling of the sense that you are where you are supposed to be and that you're on the right path. This past December, it would have been the second week. It would have been early December because it was before Christmas, but before I had an accident. And but anyways, one of the hats I wear is I am an on-call spiritual care worker for the Children's Hospital. And I got paged at 1 a.m. because a young person, 12 years old, had just died of cancer. And their family, like there were 10 members of their family, they not only wanted, some support, but they also wanted me to pray with them. So I got to the hospital, and I chose out of my prayer book a good prayer to lead them with which to lead them. And I took a moment to pray over the body of the young one. And then I left. It was about 3:00 in the morning by that point. Christmas was 2.5, 3 weeks away. And I was standing at the bus stop, and there were no Christmas lights up at the hospital. But it was early in December when things were still kind of mild, kind of drizzly, and the raindrops were catching the light from the street lamps. And the way how the light was refracted, it looked like someone had put up a string of Christmas lights. Red, green, blue, yellow, etc. And I just had this, looking at that, I just had this sudden sudden awareness of peace. And I felt so blessed to have been present for this grieving family. I just felt like, wow, I'm so glad I was there with them in this really, really crappy moment. And so, I mean, sometimes events like that just knock me off my feet, just knock me on my knock me on my ass. There are other moments when I realize I was needed, I was present, I was available for somebody suffering. And that strengthens my faith in my mission. And something else I've learned is that it's good to turn to others to help carry that burden. There are professionals out there available to help. I mean, very few, if any, of the other clergy I know, very few of them don't see a therapist on a regular basis. Because we can't carry it all alone. We are in this together.
Tell us where we are and what's happening.
Okay, well, first of all, the first part of our conversation was inside the National Arts Center and in the lobby of the theater. Now we're just outside, and we're the Rideau Canal is like, 20 yards that way down the hill, and there's a Canada goose here looking at us. And yeah, you're a goose. And if you're nice to us, we'll be nice to you. Yes. And if I'm not careful, I may come over and cuddle you. No, I won't cuddle it.
It's there's a lot of wind here, but I think I'll sit on this side here, and you can sit on. Did you?
I'm gonna sit over here.
I think it's a bit more dry, or we can
Do where it's dry.
You want to sit here?
No, you sit. I'll sit first.
Okay. We'll see if it's.
It's a little bit damp, but then.
Or we can sit over there on that portion there, if you want. What do you think?
You know, there's still people coming out because of the show going on in there. So now, this is our. All right, where were we? I don't even know. In case I sound like I have to think too hard, or I sound a little bit ditzy for lack of a better word. The fresh air out here is cool but nice. No big complaints. But in the last 6 months or 7 months, I had COVID in November. In December, mid-December, I took a very bad fall when I tripped on a crooked sidewalk tile. landed very hard, did something to my shoulder, cracked a few ribs, and then I had the flu in February. So I'm still kind of wobbly from that. I'm on a sort of sabbatical from church ministry right now. I'm on a much needed hiatus. And it's nothing too earth shattering. It's just that a parish priest who I was working with for the last 3 years retired from pastoring. So I said, okay, well, here's a great point for me just to take a break. So I wouldn't say playing hooky from church, but on the other hand, I've been going to other churches, other parishes, and taking in different ways that people encounter the divine, the holy, the sacred. I mean, I used to wear this big pewter Celtic cross, but a friend of mine who was with an Ethiopian Coptic church gave me this much more simple, humble, but still very beautiful wooden cross to wear around my neck. And this was actually made in an Ethiopian monastery. So I just thought, yeah, or was it Egyptian? Horn of Africa.
There's Coptic Christians in Egypt and in Ethiopia
And in Ottawa.
Right.
So that's, like I said, that's why I'm a little bit more spaced out than I used to be. Also, it's been 9.5 years since we last had a conversation like this.
That's right.
A lot has happened. There's a lot of blood under the bridges, I like to say.
A lot of blood.
Well, blood, sweat, and tears. And it's, so again, the pandemic. I arrived at the Carlington Community Chaplaincy a year and a half into the pandemic. This is on Caldwell Avenue, on the first floor of one of those, I think there are 18 stories, but I'm probably way off, one of those really tall high-rise apartment buildings, and it's all public housing. And it is, well, there's a great deal of isolation to begin with. There's a great deal of marginalization due to people's precarious work, precarious housing, unstable food situation, and just a lot of people are chronically ill or chronically disabled. So they were already isolated, and now, more than 5 years after the pandemic began, there are still people, rarely if ever, leave their homes. As I've said, a big part of my faith is guided by the realization that we are better together. And we can help each other through these things. Don't wait for God to come down from heaven. He's already given us the tools and the means and the personnel.
By the way, the wind is pretty significant here, and it's kind of messing up with the mic.
Do we want to move again?
Yeah, let's move. What? So we can go back inside if you'd like. Yeah, there is a goose here. Yeah.
And they're being pleasant. Well, not pleasant, but at least they're ignoring us.
Should I try to get some audio from the goose?
No.
No. Okay. I was going. If you said yes, I was going to try. But let's
Say.
Hey, I don't know. It would. I'll try to bite the mic. Where are we at?
We are now in the Ruddy, Ruddy Lounge, the National Arts Center here in downtown Ottawa. And it's quieter, but more reverb. I hope that's okay.
I think that's great. I mean, we have 3 different spots, so editing this, and I don't do a lot of deep editing, to be honest. But I will do some for sure. But first off, I do want to hear more about the work you're doing in the community as far as Carlington.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of expectations, what, in the work you do, in trying to help people, trying to listen to people, to be there for them, sometimes, you mentioned, you may have expectations.
I'm trying to remember exactly where I was going with the idea of expectations, because expectations but I mean, it's a question of leaving expectations and leaving privilege, leaving one's ego at the door when you're in that sort of situation.
How do you do that?
Practice and getting over oneself, which is a lot tougher than it sounds, because we tend to be more afraid of new situations than being willing to embrace them. We tend to be more driven more by fear and by prejudices, than we are driven by curiosity and imagination. And I've just learned, or no, let me rephrase that. I'm still learning how to look at a new situation and not see it as a problem to be solved so much as avoid being the problem oneself. That takes, and like I said, it doesn't come naturally to me, it doesn't come naturally to anybody, but it's what I've been working on learning is, a room full of people who are different ages, different backgrounds, etc. That's a room full of friends to me. That's a room full of stories to hear. That's not, that isn't the alien. That is the neighborhood. So what I do in Carlington, again, I'm working with people who are facing marginalization, who are facing food insecurity, all of these situations where I don't offer solutions, but I try to at least reach out, advocate for them, help them find the things that they need, whether it is a recovery program, a food bank, a housing lawyer, tenants, a landlord-tenant board. I don't have the answers, and I never can. But there are people who do. There's a reason why I didn't go to plumbing school instead of or alongside seminary. Because if I need a plumber, I call one.
I think folks in Ottawa might be familiar with that part of town. It has a history. It has a reputation. Unfortunately, maybe not all that positive. Well, once upon a time, it was seen as a rough neighborhood, right? and you mentioned there's many challenges there as far as food security, this, that, and the other.
I grew up in a neighborhood sort of southwest of Carlington, of Caldwell Avenue. I mean, I grew up near the corner of Clyde and Maryville in relatively prosperous Nepean. I mean, and even then, I had heard the reputation that it has of being a rough neighborhood. And I have no illusions. I mean, there was a 20 or 21-year-old young man who was shot and killed 50 yards away from my office window. Like, I've got no illusions. But that's the situation there. That's what people live with. And if we continue to marginalize and ignore them, nothing's going to get solved. These are people who need care and support. And many of them are never going to be able to work because of their health situation. So, I mean, do we want to live in a society that condones people living like that? Do we want to bring back debtors' prisons and things like that? Or why don't we make the effort and help somebody? I mean, the homeless situation in Ottawa has become so awful right now. So instead of the government investing more in mental health care, they're investing in removing homeless camps, encampments. And they're investing in the police, which, the police are great for dealing with drunk drivers or bad guys robbing the bank, but they're no help when it comes to dealing with poverty.
How has your perspective of that community, now that you are part of that community, these are your friends, right? These are people that are
definitely my neighbors.
Right.
Whether or not they're my friends, that's not for me to say. That's for them to say.
You're right. Yes. But like how I guess what I'm asking is in terms of perspectives on the community now that you're there and they are your neighbors. How has it changed from your work? Like how do you view the community now?
Well, first of all, this isn't my first experience in that kind of neighborhood. This isn't the first time that I've worked with those people. Because since in the time since you and I last talked like this, I ministered for 3 years at St. Margaret's Church in Vanier. And again, that is a rough neighborhood. And learning to talk to people, learning to listen. I mean, I was still in seminary at that point, and I had just begun ordained ministry when I was there. And dealing with the poverty, the desperation, the illness, mental and physical. That was partly a learning curve for me. It was also, again, it was a beautiful experience in trying to bring what I could to that difficult situation. There was one evening when I was we had a meeting at the church. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. It was late November. It was chilly. And I got off the bus just around the corner from the church. And I said goodnight to the bus driver. Thank you. And I got off the bus and I began walking towards the church. And this couple had been sort of, in the shadows. They were impaired. And the young man, I'd say they were in their late 20s, early 30s. He staggers out of the shadows and he said, "Hey, what did you just say to me?"
To you, he's asked.
Yeah. And his girlfriend, wife, sister, for all I know, was kind of holding him back. And I said, "Excuse me." And he said, "What did you just say to me?" I said, "Well, I was saying goodnight to the bus driver." And he said, "No, you were talking to me. What do you want?" And I paused for a moment, and I said to him, "Are you all right? Can I help you?" And that completely threw him off balance. That wasn't my intention to throw him off balance. But just again, but he was like, "No, we're just going home." So again, some people are spoiling for a fight. But more often than not, people just need someone to listen or talk or just be bloody nice.
Right.
So, St. Margaret's Church. And a year before that, I was placed as an intern at the Booth Center on George Street with the Salvation Army. And that was a learning experience. And again, it was fulfilling. I was dealing with people I was dealing with recovering addicts. And seeing how they got through the day, how they moved from one day to the next, and just listening, not judging, not blaming, but just to say, "You're safe with me for a few minutes. Talk to me." So it's, I've had the background, and no two people are the same, but they often are looking at similar circumstances. So one experience feeds the next.
I'm hearing this, what you're saying. I'm looking into your eyes, and I could see that there's a lot of stories there. There's a lot of moments, for when you're thinking back, for having worked in various communities, with many people who have various challenges. And I guess one thing that jumps out at me is, for people who may not have any empathy for others, what would you tell them about that these communities? Because they're all human. They're all like you and I. You know what I mean? They're experiencing various things. What would you tell someone who may not have any empathy for their fellow human being, in regards to these communities? And I guess I'm struggling to ask the question here, because I am, I think poverty is real in Ottawa, and maybe some folks we can come across may not care for our fellow men and women. They may not care that these individuals are living in the street, they're addicted, and they're more and more isolated. And then there are people who do the outreach work who try to listen and support them. For those who may not have any empathy for others, how would we communicate with them in terms of?
Well, my first question is, why do they not have empathy? Is it because they are themselves buried deep in their own difficulties? Are they just cold-hearted? Have they been raised to be mean-spirited? Are they, empathy is, empathy can be something that naturally occurs to somebody, that naturally happens. But it's also something that can be literally beaten out of them by circumstance. I don't want to bring up the current political situation right now, but there are a lot of people out there who lack empathy.
And absolutely. No, sorry, please continue. I'm seeing that everywhere, on social media, and obviously there's a lot of cynicism, there's a lot of lack of empathy, a lack of compassion.
Mm-hmm. And do these people come by this because they are hurting? These days everybody's hurting a little bit more than we thought they would. Is it because, is it hardwiring? There are people with mental disorders who are incapable of empathy. And it's hard to empathize with them because it sounds intentional. But for some people, they cannot be otherwise. So do I feel bad for the people who don't feel bad? For others, yes. It's not easy. Again, and I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times again, but we tend to punish people who have what we perceive as shortcomings. We punish people who are poor. We punish people who are sick. If you know anybody who's been on the ODSP program, now there's a Freudian slip and a half. It never gives them enough money. They can hardly live on that. But they're sick. They must have done something wrong. That's the reasoning. But some people have just been dealt a bad hand. And that's what does frighten me, is that there is that element of blame, of punishment, for people who, through no fault of their own, cannot pay the rent, keep the cupboards full, keep their own children well fed and clean. So, empathy. I like to think that it's something that I have just found from my own experiences. Again, it's where listening comes in. Getting over oneself, dropping the judgment, finding things in common.
Steve, I want to go back to our previous interview, and there was a very interesting part in the story where you're at your mentor's funeral. And 4 individuals came up to you. Can you tell us the story again, and that question that one of the leaders of that group?
Well, this would have been in March or April of 2007. And this was at the funeral of my mentor, Douglas Wurtle. And he had just passed away a couple of weeks before, or maybe not even quite a week. So after the funeral, I was swarmed by these big guys in black cassocks and funny hats, and some of them had big gold crosses around their necks. So they basically swarmed me and surrounded me. And one of them put the question to me, "You were his last student. What are you doing to serve the Lord?" And I didn't have an answer. These guys were all bigger than me and bearded, but also, like, at the time I was not doing very much of anything in that direction. And that was a bit of a wake-up call. And it was 2 years after that I began seminary. And just as a side note, I was ordained September 30th, 2019, 3 months after I had graduated from St. Paul with my Master's of Divinity. And I wasn't ordained a priest. I was ordained a vocational deacon. So the whole priest thing didn't work out. And what had happened was I had been turned down 3 times for the priesthood. And then, so what I did was I talked to my parish priest, and we said, okay, we're going to take a break from this. And then a year later, in 2017, I was house sitting for a good friend of mine. He'd just given me a copy of what's called the Iona Report, which was produced by the Anglican Church of Canada, about the diaconate, which is a different ministry than the priesthood. And I read through it, and I realized I'm not called to be a priest. I'm called to be a deacon. And the difference is that the place of the priest is at the altar inside the church. The place of the deacon is outside the church, in the community, among the marginalized, among the isolated. That was a big eye-opener for me. So over the next 2 years, I had written up a letter to my bishop saying, this is what I'm called to be. We have been trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. I've been trying to be somebody who I'm not. This is my vocation. So I was ordained on September 30th, 2019, day before my 51st birthday. And this is the whole idea of serving others as a church minister, as a deacon. So right now I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I'm grateful for it.
How does it feel to be where you are, where you belong, where you feel your heart, your soul, your spirit is happy and is balanced? How does that feel?
It feels peaceful, serene, grateful. Like I said, no day there is easy for me. Often when I have finished up my day there, I have to go home and have a nap for an hour and a big meal. And it can take a lot out of me, but it also nourishes and strengthens me. I feel blessed doing what I'm doing. And it can hurt like hell at times. But what in life doesn't? Nothing comes without a cost. And again, I feel blessed. I feel grateful. I feel where I'm supposed to be.
Steve, I think it's incredible that you are where you are. You feel where you're supposed to be. You know, I think maybe not a lot of people will ever even dare to find that spot, maybe that place. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. They don't know where to even start in terms of that exploration of of if it's faith, if it's if the divine, all that, the relationship with it. What I'd like to ask you, maybe this is my last question, for those who don't know where to start with their own inner journey, if it's about faith, if it's whatever it might be, well, what advice would you give them? And it doesn't have to necessarily be on the same path, and in terms, it could be whatever it might be, but that exploration, the questions to ask when it comes to tapping into one's creative path, one's spiritual path, one's trying to reconnect with family or friends, or etc.
Well,
does that even make sense? Does the question make
sense? I'm just trying to come up with an answer that would make sense.
Take your time, please.
Melanie, we can't be here all day. But the thing to keep in mind is that I wouldn't say that I was dragged kicking and screaming into this. I'm aware that I have had. I've been given certain things, certain gifts, certain abilities, certain talents.
Mm-hmm.
I've been given this, and I think it was inevitable.
Wow.
But
Steve, why do you say inevitable?
I feel that this was the journey that I was called to. And that pushing it away, trying to avoid it when I was younger, was a necessary part of the journey. I had to grow into that. And I still am. But I could still conceivably be hiding from it right now, but hiding from the call, yes, but I would be miserable. And like I said, no day at work for me is easy, but at the same time, I feel freed. I feel at peace, at peace with my decisions. So the most important thing is obviously the first step, obviously. And whether it's life as a poet, whether it is being a member of a family, take a moment and look around and listen. And know your strengths. Know your weaknesses. Be self-aware. And there may be something right in front of your eyes that is calling to you to step up, to fulfill your own goodness, fulfill, to meet a need in yourself. And it's okay to take your time finding it or fully grasping it. Because honesty is important as well. Honesty to yourself, to your family, your community, and honesty to that higher power.
I think you should write a book. Seriousness. I think you have. Thank you very much for sharing all of this. And you're absolutely right. We could probably sit here for another couple of hours and chat. Days, yeah. But it's you do incredible work. And I hope that you putting yourself out there for others, listening to them, giving them time, giving them presence. That's incredible. That's how lucky they are.
Thank you.
I'm bro. It's in this day and age of to have someone to go to not have any judgment and to speak to to speak openly and be heard, I think is a gift beyond gifts, and you know what I'm saying? Like it's precious, man. It's precious because we for any community, especially when you are in a tough spot, you're experiencing trauma and to have someone there for you is God bless you, man. Is you know what I'm saying? Like God bless you. You do incredible work. And thank you.
You as well. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. And we should do this again soon. Fewer than 5 years.
Yes, definitely. And I think if I could say this, if you could maybe, I don't know if you plan on writing a book or documenting this in your work, because I think we as a community can learn a lot from people who take the journey you take and contribute so much, because I think people may not know how much value there is, human value, spiritual value in do you know what I'm saying? In the work of helping others. We don't hear enough of these stories.
No, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, it just takes a little effort to start. It's there for all of us. I mean, one of my favorite phrases, and I've already said that, I think I've said this at least once in this conversation, is that all we have to do is just get over ourselves, to let certain things go and make that first step.
Thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. And we'll talk more like this soon, I hope. Definitely. It's been a pleasure, a blessing, and a joy.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
This has been Strictly Creative, featuring Steve Zytveld. Nearly 10 years after his first conversation, his story continues to show the power of listening and presence in building community. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow and share, and join us again for more stories of creativity, resilience, and inspiration.